Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for coming to the class here on behalf of Dominic and I. You're at Fundamentals for the Aspiring Lighting Programmer. Session 1 is Why, and we're just going to talk about how to begin thinking more like programmers. And know a lot of you have either past experience as electricians or working in the industry, and know that all your experience up to this point will help you in a transition to becoming a programmer. But in this session, we're going to talk about a little bit of the why before we talk about the how.
Definitely. Today's program is intended for rigging and shooting electricians who look to improve upon their skills and step up into the role of lighting programmer, also sentimentally known as the dimmer operator. And this class will move fast, and we have a lot of material to get through. And there are some good examples of solid practices employed by both of us throughout. Please ask any questions in the Q&A at any point, and one of us will reply in the Q&A window or interrupt for a live answer.
So just a brief introduction. My name is Jared Moore. Have been a freelance lighting designer and programmer for around the past 25 years. I have a background in theater and as a touring director for a modern dance company. I started working with IATSE 476 in the summer of 2013, and I got my card in 2014. I'm also an ETCP certified entertainment electrician, and I'm most known for working with the show Empire as their primary board op for all 6 seasons, where I also helped design concerts and things that were on that show.
I'm from a theater background as well, the typical high school theater through college theater pipeline. Post-college life has taken me through work in many lines, in particular concert, corporate, convention, dance, and the nightclub world for the past 14 years or so. And I'm pretty new to 476, and my most recent gigs were the upcoming Fox TV show Next and some single day plays on other TV shows. A quick disclaimer, it can take quite a while to reach certain levels of programming, but the learning never stops. One class won't make you a programmer, but it can help you realize what skills you need to study and learn to get there.
And also another disclaimer, during this presentation, we do speak of and show off a lot of products from a lot of different manufacturers. Neither Dominic and I endorse specifically any of these products, but just know that these are all tools in the toolbox, and everybody has different tools. So that should take care of any liability there. Okay, so let's get into it. First, we're going to talk about the philosophy of the programmer. And this is actually a little hierarchy that you can look at that would work in any line of business, but we're going to see how it works for us. So here we see the kind of 3-tiered idea of being a programmer. We have our knowledge, experience, and communication. So to briefly touch upon each of these points, I want to say this concept is from Bobby Harrell, who's a famous lighting programmer and lighting designer. And I got this from him at an LDI convention. So the facet number 1 here, the knowledge, we want to talk about software, right? That includes any of our CAD programs like Vectorworks, AutoCAD, any pre-visualization software we use on the computer. We want to talk about hardware. We get into specifics of the lighting consoles themselves and the equipment that goes along with them. We're talking about IT equipment like network switches and just your hardware as far as that goes. Technical ability is of course a great asset, and that deals with your programming acumen. Just how many things do you know how to do on how many different consoles, and that's your sort of technical ability there. The next facet, experience, is covered by the basics, the unknown, and the impossible. Now basics, I'm kind of talking about things like bringing up going to a board and bringing up a channel on stage, knowing you can do that, knowing how to patch a lighting fixture into a lighting console, and super simple things like that, recording a basic cue. The unknown is something we're talking about, like when you have to program a complex effect. The sequence is going to take some time, and it's an unknown sort of thing until you have that experience, how much time that's going to take. So that's kind of an unknown. And then when I'm talking about the impossible, That's knowing when you can steer someone in the correct direction. Like someone asks you to do a very smooth color fade with a certain moving light, and you know as the programmer, well, that moving light has only a dichroic glass color filter, and it's not going to be able to smoothly mix color and do a smooth change. It's going to have a bump change. And then communication, of course, in all businesses and all things is our number one asset. And so we want to talk about listening, understanding, and responding. Listening as a board op and dimmer op and programmer for a television or a film production is key. You need to always be listening in your ear, always be listening to the gaffer's request and the feedback from your fellow electricians who are working the set. They're going to be supplying information back to you, like what lights they're setting and what channels and fixtures those are and all sorts of things like that. Understanding is hearing a command from a gaffer and being able to respond back, yes, I'm working on that. That channel is now at 50, and sort of responses like that. Again, with the responding. So that is the sort of idea here.
So let's talk a little bit about what exactly we do. You all know it's not just button pushing at the console all day, and it can encompass quite a lot of responsibilities. And we're going to go through some of those responsibilities that you might see during the production process.
Right. So when you're a full-time dimmer op lighting programmer, multitasking is key. And the following slides here represent many of the other things that we're tasked with aside from the live programming aspect. So this is a set map drawing from the show Next Dominic was mentioning at Cinespace, where that production was taking place. You can see that this drafting is very detail oriented. It should be clear to gaffers, both the rigging gaffer and the shooting gaffer, the crew, the DP, etc. So we're going to discuss these plots and maps at length. The second thing we can do is managing a signal path, wired and wireless. This is a helpful drawing from the dimmer op from Chicago PD, Colin with 476. It represents a local system of lighting control with both physical and wireless components. So we're always going to be noting the importance of the key. So you can see here in the middle, there's like the lighting console itself, which is then the signal path here is to an Astera box, which is transmitting to Astera tubes. And we'll talk more about sort of lighting fixtures like that later. Wirelessly, we see there's a couple iPads here that are wireless remotes and a couple network switches and things like that. So you can see that there's a lot that goes into that sort of signal path of ours. Another thing we're talking about are local lighting systems on stage, or local area networks, LANs, which anyone knows from your house. If you've got your printer or your TV and everybody wants to be on the same network and communicating, this is a lighting schematic that the key factors that are stressed here in this communication are talking about IP addresses for your equipment, as well as the subnet mask, which that, as listed here, the IP and the subnet, that allows your whole system to talk together sort of flawlessly. And then these drawings like this also give information on what type of cable is being used and what type of protocol you're sending out through these processors. We can see that there's a Cat6 Ethernet cable running to each of these processors, and then out of these processors, there's some 5-pin XLR DMX data cable. So also, we're talking about implementing and managing data protocol. In conjunction with our lighting networks, we have to understand which protocols to use and choose. These are all these here are examples of data protocols sent over Ethernet or Cat cable. You have to, when getting into each of these, you have to understand the strengths and limitations of each. And you also understand that some protocols are proprietary, like HogNet and MANet, which is just a proprietary signal that travels over Cat cable from those given manufacturers. And some things like ArtNet and SACN, streaming ACN, is universal to all systems.
So one of the most important duties for a dimmer op prior to shoot is the drop layout to hand off to the rigging electricians. With the oft-changing nature of sets, these can sometimes have handwritten or digitally notated changes, often the rigging electricians dislike. And providing clean work the first time for your rigging crew helps them get the plot up as quickly as possible. Plots can often notate the Dmx path, the Dmx addresses or universes, hang position, height, or style, or blank space for specific info like circuits to be written in. And with the advent of intelligent fixtures, patch lists become more important to the rigging and shooting crews prior to stage and truck load-in. Getting your dressing done during the lacing and loading period helps save time later on. So make sure you talk with your gaffer ahead of time, decide on what modes you want to use, figure out what will be wired and what needs to be wireless. This particular data printout is light-right paperwork and is an industry standard tied directly to lighting plots used for rental and vendor crew alike.
Another aspect of what we do is archiving shot setups, and this is actually for archival purposes as well as you're shooting on the day, because you know the stream of consciousness lighting that is on set, you could be tasked at knowing where another 30 individual fixtures have been placed on set and knowing the channel number and where they sit and how to recall and what fixtures those are. So this is another thing we can both scribble out and redraft, because also we know in our industry that reshoots are a thing. So if a production leaves and comes back and needs to reshoot a specific scene, we're able to record all that both in the lighting console and in our archiving our shot setups. Another thing we do, an elevation layout for hangs. Sometimes a bird's eye view or ground plan of the plot isn't going to get it hung correctly. We have to understand our basic drafting skills and be able to communicate with rigging crews. And again, you need to always have a key and provide as much information as you can. So this specialty project here provides all the spacing for the lighting instruments that are hanging on this grid. And here's the key telling you which moving lights those fixtures are.
Some sets may require you to create and build unique fixtures. These could be uniquely installed LED strips, perhaps some pixel tape behind a cyc transparency, or other non-traditional fixtures. And other responsibilities, of course, include dimmers and fixtures, checked in numerous ways prior to shoot. Check for flickers. Check that the fixtures properly dim up and down smoothly. Check your breakers. Check that fixtures all appear to be at the same brightness level at a certain percent. Check every color diode in your LEDs. Check your filters. Check your network. There's quite a lot that you can check when it comes to beginning of day check and maintenance.
Another thing we deal with is creating work light systems. So many shows have multiple sets on multiple stages. As we know, there has to be a way to trigger lights on the sets when others need to light up the space. We want to stop letting crews panic the dimmer racks, which essentially means hitting a button and everything turns on to full. That's the thing we don't want to have happen. So we have to understand how to create a switchable system for day players and other ops, how to turn on the lights when the sets are required to do so. Console routing for multiple sets. Again, you need to understand your call sheet and your one-liner, and most shoot days are on multiple sets or have a company move involved. So most shows have multiple consoles. So you as the programmer need to plot out which consoles are working where on what day and how that affects the shooting day and whether things need to move around and that sort of thing. And then the biggest and sort of most gold star part of it is the creating set maps for gaffers. And this is maybe the most familiar to everyone. It's the most important sort of document on the shooting day, and it's directly related to the success of the crew. So we're going to spend a lot of time covering these coming up here.
So what kind of questions should you have prepared when you are called on to be the dimmer op for the day? Let's think about that.
Right, so there's what communicate needs to happen with the board op before you take the wheel. When we get into this, we want to talk about standard practices for that set. And there I'm kind of talking about where does my lighting console go on a particular set that I'm on? Where does the data plug in? Am I familiar with the socket pecs or multi-cable drops where shooting electricians can plug in fixtures on the day? Or do I know where all the data ports are and the nodes in my line, in my lighting network line? That way I can direct people where they need to go when plugging in certain types of fixtures. Specific power up procedures for that set. You could have a range of LED fixtures that's powered specifically from a data controlled relay. And you would need to know how to execute that to get the power to turn on correctly, or like you'll be able to diagnose why power isn't on a certain fixture, which fixtures are on dimmers and which aren't, and that sort of thing. Signal path and protocol. Like we've mentioned so far already, you need to know your network layout. You shouldn't have to adjust these things, but you need to know it. So you need to know how that data path runs from the lighting console and out over the entire system. Control surfaces, there we're just speaking of what lighting console am I using? What desk am I on that day? Do I have to use an iPad as a remote control to that desk because I'm expected to be at Video Village next to the DP and Gaffer and that sort of thing? So you need to know what control surfaces you're going to use. Here again, that signal path thing, the location of dimmers and nodes. Every now and then a breaker will trip and you need to know where to go to reset that breaker, right? So you need to know where your dimmer rooms are or where all the dimmer packs are on that particular set. Backup procedures, that's how, speaking with the primary op, how do you label and save the shots so that the work you did today, so that way your primary op, when they come back, aren't confused or you didn't lose any information there.
So just make sure you're reviewing all material prior to shoot. Again, ask questions prior to shoot. If you're unsure of something, it's worth it to spend a little bit of time to talk to the primary op ahead of time. Make sure you're asking for the call sheet, asking about potential cues, and again, there are no dumb questions. And also helps to make sure you're scheduled for that pre-call to walk the line and perform the dimmer check.
Right. And typically, what we say is typically people can learn to run channels up and down on a set in no time. And also as lighting network constructors, we strive to make our systems fail-proof. So 99% of the time, nothing's going to go wrong. But as you'll start to see, it's the 1% of the time that things fail when the experience really comes into play. So as programmers, we don't want to think of ourselves as button pushers, hence the name, the kind of tongue-in-cheek name of the class. We want to start talking and thinking about lighting conceptually, like you're the director of photography, gaffer, lighting designer's associate, and you need to know how to turn their visions into the ones and zeros in that programming. So we're now going to show you how we present and synthesize information and how that translates into the lighting console. And just Dom, a quick check-in. Do we have any Q&A yet?
Not yet.
Okay, great.
But perhaps we will as we start to really dive in right here. And let's talk about this idea of the master plot. It's the plot that often contains the most information regarding a light plot on a set. The light plot sometimes omits information that may be necessary for the crew receiving the plot, or it can appear different depending on who drafted the plot. But as the dimmer board operator or lighting programmer for the day, you need to be able to translate all of the information provided. So many of us come from a theater background, and theater plots can be a bit easier to understand than film, depending on the stage style, like proscenium, the thruster, and the round. Our first plot has a lot of information on it, but it's very clean and provides an ideal grease to get the first section started. And yeah, we're going to talk about grease. So this is a plot that Jared designed in 2 parts and is great for exploration. Here we see our top-down view with the stage at the bottom. And he also has an elevation view as part of this. Each plot has a key and legend, and both very important to understanding fixture data. Let's hop in a little bit here and take a look at that key or label legend. So often the key is the very first item I'll look at before looking at the plot itself. You need to understand the drafter's shorthand. They are trying to tell you a lot of information on that plot, often in a little amount of space. Right now, we're trying to tell you a lot of information on a small screen. So let's zoom in a little bit further here. So here's a sample of fixtures from that key. Some items I'd like to point out. Note that Jared chose to place wattage information by the fixtures, and that helps the rigging electricians ensure that the pars are lamped correctly. And down below, those intelligent fixtures have wattage by them, and that helps the rigging crew decide how many to place on a circuit. Some other things I'd like to point out, like notice the slight difference in symbol from the medium flood to the wide flood par lens. All really great details to have there. And here we see the legend, which is typically at the top or at the bottom of the key with all the symbols. And the most important items, if I were to come to this show to operate it, would be the channel, the instrument type, the template, and what color is in the fixture. There's a good amount of info here, and I'll bet that on the plot we see info that we need to decode.
And let's say typically dimmer info is omitted from the LD's plot, or a blank space is left for the master electrician to fill in with the crew. And that's sort of talking about in the theater realm of things. In today's sort of modern age, plots and paperwork are updated via the cloud, so everyone can stay on the same page at the same time. Now, typically, lighting designers or their assistants would have to update these plots every night after different phases of load in or after different phases of technical rehearsal with the new notes for the crew the next day. So a lot of late hours there.
So we got to zoom in on a portion of that plot here. And having worked with plots a lot, I know the information I want to look at is generally channeling info. So I see a par at the top there. I know that's channel 295. I see a pair of gang to source 4s on channel 257 that have a template in them. So let's say I'm looking at those high sides on the 4th and 1st electric, and I'm like, okay, those look like source 4s and they have their channeling info, but I don't really know what that colored circle item is in there. I probably need to go over to the key to figure out what that is. So sure enough, we head over to the key and we see that that colored item is a C changer, which is a color changer that physically goes into that fixture. And so Jared had to decide, okay, I need to come up with a symbol for that C changer, what makes sense. And we end up with like a really nice four circle color graphic there. So going back to another part of the plot, we see some more C changers at the top. We know they're channeling info right away. We see a bit of a slash on that LECO, which would identify what degree it is. If we wanted to know what degree, again, we'd go back to the key. A new item that we see here is this shaded out sort of fixture here with no actual numbers on it. And what we do see here, though, is a call out. It's that little line with an arrow that leads to 4 boom stage left. And what that means is that we probably need to locate info about that specific area at another portion of the plot, which would be our elevation view. So we go to our elevation view, and here we see all the information that we need, which would be the channeling. He even has the elevation heights, which is really handy. At the bottom, you see 8-foot 4-inch upstage of the PL, which is proscenium line, and then 23 feet stage left of center line. And we also see our accessory info on the bottom one. Looks like it has a scroller. So I just really, really like this plot. It's a great example of clean work, and it's a good plot to introduce ourselves to. And we're going to start to dig down into a couple other plots that are not so theater oriented.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about a hybrid light plot. And now hybrid plots will use many of the elements of theatrical plots, but we're going to start to see film-specific fixtures that we all know and love, like Kino flows, gem balls, etc. Examples of productions that would use like a hybrid plot would be talk shows, for instance, local broadcast, evening news, competition shows, and the following. It's kind of a blending of theater and film together. So the example we're going to look at here is from a show called Frankenfood that was aired on the Spike network. And it was a reality competition where people invented crazy recipes and some crazy ones and a good one like Chicago hot dog ingredients in a Chicago deep dish pizza. So a little local flair there. Interesting thing about this show, it was shot in several different cities around the United States, and plots had to be adapted to each city as they went. So here we're looking at the general plot for the show and how it was adapted for our Chicago run here. We'll notice the scale of the space has shrunk from the theater plot, as well as the amount of instruments. We saw that Grease plot had several hundred instruments on it. Here, we just want to stress the key is still the key, and the KISS principle, which we all start to like, is the keep it simple, stupid, right? So the more simple it is, the easier for everyone to understand, and that's always a good rule. The info surrounding the fixtures varies from plot to plot, and as your personal style emerges and your career advances, your drafting will also advance as you go here. So let's look at the key and the plot as a whole a little bit closer. So we're starting to get some new info to us that we didn't see on our theatrical plot. New info to us here is this group number. We have this sort of circular color code next to these instruments. We start to see those film fixtures like I was talking about, like Kino Flow Diva, the 2K Zip Soft Light, and things we might be familiar with as filmmakers. And sort of those coming from the set electrician background. This is like you start to get into your bread and butter, right? Moving ahead. So the old info here, we're seeing channel number, instrument type, and focus position. So channel number, instrument type, again, the slash, which denotes a source 426 degree, and a focus like the J key table, which if we were using moving lights, we could use this focus information to build focus palettes on the lighting console and that sort of thing. But we're trying to get as much information into a small area as we can. So what's kind of new here? What does the pink circle mean around the channel versus the yellow circle? And so if we had clicked back, we'd see that a pink circle here is in the baby 2K 2000 watt Fresnel group. And you know, the other fixture here is in the source 4 group. So a lot of us might be familiar with the concept of sockopex or multi-cable, the 6-circuit breakouts. And when we're talking about socko numbering, circuit numbering, dimmer numbering, dimmer 1 through 6 is typically a sockopex A, where dimmer 5 would be A5 in that circuit. So we're talking about, we start to talk about a lot of different numbers. So the channel number, which is actually the controlled, the number on the board you use to control the fixture to call it up. We're talking about the dimmer number, which is the way it's patched in the console, the actual dimmer it's responding to, and the circuit number, which would be the number of the sockopex cable or multi-cable that it's plugged into. So here, what are the observations we see here? Here again, we're talking about the channel number, the instrument number itself, how we could reference it on the light-right paperwork in our instrument schedule. We're seeing the circuit number and the dimmer number there and the focus on the key. Dominic, I saw there was a Q&A pop up. Should we hit it?
Definitely. Brad here was talking about using pre-visualization software that also creates plots and instrument reports for you, like Wysiwyg, which is like what you see is what you get, and Vectorworks. And I mentioned that I've personally used Vectorworks to output 3D data into Light Converse with a good amount of success. I really enjoy it. I've never used what you see is what you get, but I hear really good things and I want to get into that. So mention, perhaps at the end, if he is willing to stick around and other people who may have done that, I would love to hear more about that or get some more info on how to better implement it.
Yeah, and an interesting thing to note about your visualizers too is that typically, really, with softwares of these days, you can download the offline versions of these lighting consoles and be able to use the visualizer straight away, on your computer there just at home, which is a great, actually great practice, when getting into the field.
Definitely. So let's take a look at a couple more plots that are a bit more specific to our industry. So let's talk about Next, which was the production I was just on over the winter. And here's a plot I did for a relatively small house on stage 19 at Cinespace. And you can see the design or the stylization of it is a little bit different from the plots we've just looked at. My personal style is I like to create custom fixture symbols to assist the rigging team in immediate recognition of the fixture type. So the mole LEDs on the left actually have mole LED written in them. S60s actually have S60 written in them. So let's zoom into that label legend again, because that's the first thing we always like to look at. And you can see my custom symbols there with the little name in them. And you might notice I've kind of made a mistake here, and I completely forgot to notate what container the fixture address is in. And this is something that can happen. You may see mistakes on plots, and it's up to you to realize that there's a mistake and figure out what's going on, or let the lighting programmer know, hey, you messed up, let's fix this. So another example of a call out I have here was for this little window space. There wasn't quite enough area to draft all these fixtures around the window. So instead of making a whole second page, I chose an area to do a window call out to place those extra fixtures there with a couple of notes on them, like the T12 was to be on a trusser beam, the S60 is mounted on the ground. And I also do some call outs on another portion of the set. And then like the T12, that was to be on the ground. That second T12 was to be on a trapeze. The gaffer requested that S60 to be on a floor stand. So just an example of how you might want to notate your paperwork so that when you give it to the rigging team, they can be ready to go. So let's take a look at a pretty neat draft design that Jared received from a fellow 476 member. This took place at the Grand Ballroom at the end of Navy Pier during the shoot for Divergent. Jared was functioning as the rigging dimmer op on that production, and along with the rigging crew made sure the system was wrung out by the time the shooting crew arrived. So this included addressing, troubleshooting, and patching, etc. So I had never quite seen a plot like this before we built this class, and I really kind of liked it. It provided a unique set of info that provided valuable information for the rigging crew. And the drafter had the foresight to plot exactly where he wanted the EOS desk to go before setup for the shoot. And board area can be tough when we talk about locations. You must not impede the shot or have to move a large system that is not instantly mobile. Another item I really like on here especially is just that Dmx path, like that black line that you can see outlining there. And he even has it, if we zoom in the key here, he mentions like this is the direction. So we know that DMX, the male's at the board, the female goes to the fixture. So we kind of see that with the direction of the DMX universe pointing that way. We got some nice color coordination around the fixtures themselves, channel, dimmer, and what universe. So here we see the path first manifest itself in two universes from the gateway. And note the color coordination of the opto-ISO. I really like that. So red represents the regenerated signal, blue represents the through signal, and green represents the input. And Jared, how about you tell me a little bit about those plus symbols we see by the back dimmer numbers?
Right, so in this instance, this is just for patching ease. We know that that each fixture is gonna use 10 10 controllable channels. So in this way, it was being notated that each of these fixtures was 10 higher than the last in that path. And it's also difficult to tell here. We need to make sure we're looking at that key closely, because we see actually there's two, a studio force fixture and a right arm fixture here. So this is actually a combined, this is two fixtures working together as one. So it's a static LED wash light on an articulating arm fixture, turning that static light into a moving light. So also things we do as programmers are interesting, because the fact that now we would probably take both of these fixtures and create a custom profile in our lighting console to merge the two together, so we could control it with just one grab of a channel number, and not having to control it as two separate fixtures.
Definitely. So that's a good example of, I didn't quite know what was going on with those black numbers, but I know to ask. So here's a fixture that wasn't on the key at all, but we can probably take a reasonable guess and guess that it's a moving head fixture. So your mind will fill in those blanks.
Okay, so the next section, we're going to look at the theatrical magic sheet and a variety of set maps, and to see how all that info correlates. So these become our most important tools for communication and synergy on the shoot. Okay, so here we're going back to that production of Grease we're talking about. And this is what we're looking at here, is a theatrical / Broadway style of magic sheet. The biggest point with these pieces of paper being, can I read the damn thing in the dark? It's created by lighting designers and sometimes assistants to aid in the programming of your show. And it's the most referenced document on the tech table and when you're designing a show. So the idea here is that the information has to be crystal clear and arranged how both the programmer and designer want it. And what it does is it takes a huge show, if we remember that light plot with hundreds of fixtures, and it condenses it down and makes it navigable. So we can see that all those fixtures are represented on one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper here. So let's talk about the info on it and how it's laid out in systems for speed and accuracy. And now speed and accuracy are two really important concepts that we're going to talk about as we go through the whole presentation, and understand that speed is great, but speed is nothing without accuracy when you are programming. And we're going to see how these ideas on the magic sheet translate to our film sets later. But what we want to do is notice the color representation here on the magic sheet. Yellow being groups, which we will start to talk about now and also talk about in the future. But a group is just a group of channel numbers that you can call up as one item. So, you know, all my Verilight fixtures here is group 1, meaning I can control all 9 of these fixtures by calling up group 1 on the lighting console. And that's a very important concept to understand. And then you'll see here all these other individual channel numbers with just the white background. That's an individual fixture or an individually two-fert or ganged set of fixtures. So that would be a single channel call up. We're going to zoom in a little closer now here. So here we're pushing in on a Cyclite system for lighting our back Cyclorama, which if you don't know is a theatrical drop that it can be made of a variety of materials, muslin, plastic, all sorts of things. It can be painted, not painted, and it's used for, you know, color washing, having a surface in which to light on the typically behind the set. So what info is here and what conventions are being established and how to read the shorthand of the magic sheet. So if we look at 109 here, yellow I said was group, right? So this 109 is group 109, and that represents all RP psych. So that's all rear projection psych. So that means group 109 encompasses all these channel numbers here, you know, 311 through 321, as well as all these other groups. Group 110, which only controls channels 311 and 312, which is the rear projection low violet color wash. So here again, that's basically the conceit here, that the group controls the individual channels. You're able to group them together to make your show more navigable. Um, Now we're going to punch down on a different lighting system. It's our downlight scrollers. Some things we can see in this box, we start to understand the concept. Some new information here, we see a little arrow up in the corner, and on the theatrical magic sheet, this is symbolic of the direction the light is coming. So with the little T on it and the arrow pointing down, I know that that is actually a downlight or a top light. Now, if the little T section here was gone, I would understand the shorthand that this is a backlight. Here again, we're seeing individual fixture channels 61 through 85, and then we're seeing yellow groups. We're seeing group 25 here would control all the channels in this particular group of scrollers, whereas group 29 here would just control channels 61 through 63. And we can see that that is, like you said, it's a quick way to synthesize all this information and understand what you're dealing with, and you'll start to understand the shorthand involved there. So now we start to transition to our set map and what is represented here versus what is represented in the magic sheet. And then we need to understand who needs to understand what is represented here. Now, typically when you're working on a show, it's going to have a giant Bible of drawings of these schematics of all your sets. We do sort of pitch this class in the way that you start to think, oh, maybe you're going to be a substitute dimmer op or programmer, or you are able to actually step up when that crew person needs to step away, either to have lunch or rig another set or pre-light another set with the gaffer. You're competent enough to understand the material in front of you and what's being presented that you're able to run the lighting console. As I was saying, most shows have a giant Bible of drawings, and when you are going to be a substitute, you want to make sure you have the ones you're going to be working with in advance digitally and make sure they are current. Because we all know a lot of sets get redressed, rebuilt, changed, new fixtures added. So you really want to make sure you're dealing with the most current drawing, and most all good drawings will have a date that actually the revision date down in the title block. So you'll know that you have a current drawing. I also like to see, it helps me on stage to see the cardinal directions, or at least a north mark to know that's important. So as a drafts person, I always like to include a compass. But here again, like the magic sheet, we're going to start seeing color representation. We're going to see channel numbers, groups, and this sort of thing. So we're going to punch in closer on this. So this, like we've been looking for, this is kind of a hybrid, right, of like lighting plots and magic sheets. We can see that there's title blocks. We can see that there's call outs, as Dominic mentioned, call outs on light plots. We can see that there's other specific notes. We can see that there's individual fixtures like this 2K instrument here. These, what we would assume to be fluorescent lights, we could see here. We can see also Sockopex drops shown, like we talked about back with the hybrid plot, so you know where your fixture's plugging in. And again, with these set maps, readability is probably the most important aspect of them. The ability to be able to understand them and quickly. Like I said, you program with speed and accuracy. So let's look a little bit closer even at the key here. Which we're always saying the key is key. So like all plots, the fixture types in this drawing are represented in the chosen shorthand of the drafts person that drafted them. So we can see here, like on our Frankenfood plot, there's some colored circles that represent different things for us: generic dimmers, generic practicals, chandelier, shandy type dimmer, practical. An airy sky panel. You can notice, it might have been difficult to notice, but when looking at the key, this fixture actually is not represented on this drawing anywhere anymore. So you need to double check, like Dominic was saying, double check all the work you get. And like I said, there's many different iterations of drawings that could have different different things on them, different season, different drawing, and that sort of thing. So we're punching down on one individual fixture here, which is the 2K zip soft light, and we can see how that's represented and how it matched up in the key. You know, when we click back, we see that it's here. It's our 2K zip soft light, and we see that it's channel 14. So we know that when we bring up channel 14 at full on the lighting console, this is the particular fixture we're going to include. So here, getting more into that concept of groups that we talked about on the magic sheet, like I said, it's a way to break down your show or your set or your plot to make it more navigable. So here we see there's some basic groups. The group one is all the sky panels on that set. There's also some subgroups here. Group 1.1 would be the sky panels that are most east. Group 1.2, the sky panels that are most west. And knowing when I enter that in the lighting console, that's the result that I'm going to get. Grouping is also really important because without them, you're going to be typing in an endless string of numbers to achieve a desired command or look in your console. It breaks it down to be manageable. So like when in doubt, build a group. If you're on a set that has 27 sconces, you should probably build a group for those 27 sconces so you can change the intensity at the same time. So let's look back at the bigger picture and we'll talk a little bit more about groups. I want to talk about group order in consoles can also be important, especially when you're creating special effects or working with intelligent or automated lighting. Notice here how all the overheads are broken into groups, and notice how I can black out an entire room with a specific group. If you look down on here, group 101 to 152, it's probably kind of small on your screen, is all the quasars, which again are these LED fluorescent lights that are throughout this set. So I know I can control all those at one time. All control room, this was actually the set that was a recording studio. So this side of the set was the control room where the mixing console was. And I know if I kill group 401, that entire portion of the set's gonna black out. So it's great to have groups for like everything. Like I said, so it's powerful. And like, if you learn maybe nothing else from the first portion of this seminar, just build groups when you're setting up your show. To really get a set running, all you need is the board, some lights, the patch, which we'll speak about later, and some groups, and the rest is kind of, you know, candy on top of that. Here with a punch in on this particular map, we see sconces stacked on top of outlets. Here the orange rectangle represents a sconce light, and I know that's in my nomenclature of my key. I know that sconce is channel 61, and this sconce is channel 67, and know that I've probably built a group for these two sconces to be controlled together. Another idea to impress upon you, and something important when you're drafting, is like your font choice has to be readable. So you don't want to use all the fancy calligraphy. Like, again, go back to the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, right? So as an electrician, when I look at this, what does this tell me? Here we can see, like I've been talking about, the Saccopex drops. This is Sacco A, which if we're like refreshing our mind back to 15 or 20 minutes ago, typically Saccopex A would be plugged into your first dimmer rack, which the first set of 6 channels, 6 dimmers would be 1 through 6. So I would label that Saccopex would be labeled A. I would know that's dimmer 1 through 6. And when we get into what we will discuss later, the soft patching of the lighting console, I can actually route any of these dimmers to any soft channel I want to call up. So for instance, if this sconce was plugged into dimmer 1, I could still make it channel 61. It doesn't have to be channel 1. So these are all concepts you have to be familiar with. Here's another episodic show I worked on called Mind Games. Its main stage set was an office building. So we're going to examine these drawings and see what new info we're getting and how the drafted world continues to represent the real world. So, man, that's a lot of numbers, right? This is a lot of information to take in on one drawing. So what info is new on this one that we haven't talked about? We know we've talked about individual channels and groups and that sort of thing. We've started to see the color key. But what I'm just noticing myself, even without looking at my notes, I'm like, well, up here, I've got something called an elevator gag, and it says Rat Pack 1, Rat Pack 2. So elevator gag, you know, gag's the slang for any sort of effect we're doing, whether it's like a police-like gag, or in this case, an elevator gag, which just means actually I had to physically program the lighting console for this because the elevator's not actually moving, but I'm programming the lighting console to make the numbers and the arrows move up and down like it was a real elevator sort of happening. So that's something specific you can get into there. It's important to know, and I hope some of you went to Ned's awesome Dmx 101 class, and something to note from the divergent plot is that there are rules in our DMX rules, like there should be no more than 32 devices on a given daisy chain of data cable. You can see when we'll zoom in that the MacTech LED fixtures here are daisy chained and in the same universe, which we'll get to. So again, keep stressing the key is the key, right? This is an older one. I talked about that personal growth before, but we'll start to see again here, colors represent many different things. For instance, for the electrician looking this, I'm seeing that all these magenta circles here represent where a 20 amp circuit would be dropped. These sort of green teal ones, a 60 amp circuit would be dropped perhaps for a 5K Fresnel, 100 amp circuit, and a 220 volt circuit. So these are all different specifically notations for our electricians to know what type of electricity we want to drop there when they're rigging the set. And then here's new information we haven't seen, this RGB versus slash HSI fixture. Now maybe some of us know what that means, but to tell you who don't, it's just a way of color mixing for this particular fixture. If my memory serves, this was a few years ago, it was an Airy L7 Fresnel. And so we were using it in the mode that you could either mix the red, green, and blue LEDs to create different colors, or HSI, which stands for hue, saturation, and intensity. And we get into a little more of those concepts in our second session, but just knowing that's another way to set color. For instance, your hue and saturation, if your saturation is a full 360 and your hue is 0, you're gonna get a primary red type of color. So here again, like I was talking about, what new information do we see? We see LAD 28 through 30. If we referenced our key, we would see that these are LED ladder lights. We see here with these MacTech 480 fixtures, we see both a channel, which is that number we're using in the board to call things up, as well as a patch, which we haven't gotten into too much, but understanding that the patch here shows a universe number, which we know from our DMX 101 class, hopefully, that a universe is a group of 512 addresses on a given universe. And then, so we see that this 2 here represents universe 2, which is on our second universe, and we know that's address 1 on that second universe. So that's kind of that plot. And then the last thing to look at here, oftentimes we're asked to, as dimmer ops, to recommend a circuit layout for a rigging gaffer, or sometimes they dictate their wishes themselves. It really just depends. So whichever way the cookie crumbles, you need to draw it so the riggers can drop the cable where it needs to go. This typically gets done before a finished map so people can get to work. Sometimes it can be used for archival purposes. I like to save and archive copies of things when I know they won't change season to season, in case you need to revert to a previous type of setup. Dominic, did we have any questions pop up? No, we're good? Okay.
Yeah, so Jared's pretty darn good, and I really liked looking at all of his plots while we were making this presentation. I learned so much about how I can improve, and we'll go back to some of my plots and take a look at a couple of them. And here's a magic sheet that I created that represented strictly practical fixtures and outlets. This particular set had a wealth of outlets and can lights available, and it helped to have a dedicated magic sheet for these particular items. So again, let's look at the key first. And you can kind of see again, I'm creating these sort of custom fixtures that have the name of the item on the inside. So when you look at the plot, you know right away, oh, this symbol represents dim power, hard power, or a rat pack or a lunchbox. And I also, on this magic sheet, put my groups along the outside. And on the set, we didn't actually end up changing any intensities by group. The gaffer often requested individual fixtures go up or down slightly, but I did find creating these groups to be very helpful for use for dim check at the beginning of the day, especially say the carpenters or set deck was working in a certain room. Well, I can't go black on them. So being able to quickly get through dimmer check without making it black out in a certain room helped out a lot. So let's look at a little bit of a close-up here. One item I did for this particular set was just a straight one-to-one patch where the dimmer and the channel are always the same across it. And this helped the rigging crew a little bit. They were asking, you know, okay, well, what circuits do you want from this rat pack 12 by 1.2? Where do you want them to go? And so I just kept it kind of easy and did a one-to-one. That helped everyone a lot. And another thing I did on this particular plot was place symbols for the physical rat pack dimmer units and what areas I felt they would physically belong on that set. And this provided the rigging crew with an ideal location for the rat pack. It gave them a start address. And if you get called on to be the dimmer op for, say, this show, and you had some issues with the rat pack, you would know where those rat packs would be on set if you go and need to check them. Again, I'd like to call out one of my mistakes here. The bottom left rat pack, I have that address listed as 63 when its starting address should actually be 53. So I believe the rigging electrician, Scott, he called me out on that, and I'm glad that he did, and we got it fixed right away. So starting out as an op, you might see simple sets like this. So this set was strictly diva lights on a green screen, and then just a ton of fluorescence. It was an office lab kind of situation, and for key lights, we used a lot of the truck package. But again, I like to keep the work clean. So let's go in a little bit here, and you can see, again, the custom fixtures where I put diva light on them. And then I did kind of a little shorthand for fluorescent tube, just fluor tube, and did a simple color differentiation. The fluorescent tubes had a little bit of blue on them. The diva light had a little bit of red. So again, coming up with your personal preference on what you want your symbols to look like can help a lot and help you quickly decide on set what you want to do. Let's take a look again at a little bit busier of a plot, and we're going to take a look at the plot drafted by the lighting programmer for Chicago PD. And another pretty good sized plot. So let's zoom in and see how this particular drafter does his set. Again, let's look at the instrument key. And let's take a second to look at his aesthetics. We have some really nicely shaped symbols with the names written on the inside. We have some good variance in the color coordinating. I like the outlet, the bulletin board light, the sconce. You can tell right away that those colors are different and would represent different fixtures. And we get some of the classic shapes that we all know and love, like Fresnel lensed fixtures, pars, and Legos. So let's look at how he puts these fixtures on the actual plot. And zooming in here, we can see really nice spacing in general. We can tell we have these image 80s going around a portion of that set there. On the outside, it looks like those would be ladder lights is what I would assume. And again, I'd look at the key if I wanted to figure out for sure. We can see a 10K there, so I like how 10K is written in there, that channel 291. So really nice paperwork, and of course, ramp. And let's look at some of the smaller rooms here. And I just really like how he did them. They're really clean, just enough info to understand his shorthand. He doesn't write out observation room, or else it might take up some of the room where those lights are actually identified. So again, a lot of info in a very small space, but sometimes you might run into situations where your gaffer is carrying around the magic sheet and they don't want that big 8.5 by 11 sheet. You know, perhaps they want something smaller they can fit in their pocket. So I found out that the gaffer for Next enjoyed having these smaller magic sheets to fit in his pocket. So I changed my drafting style to be something a little bit more simple, something you could take out that's, you know, maybe the size of 3 business cards and still be able to tell what fixtures are where. So on this particular one, I decided to put only the most essential information, which was, it's a pretty simple set, fortunately. So we had a lot of wall fixtures. We had only 5 intelligent fixtures, and then some practicals and outlets spread out throughout the space. So to make it a little bit more readable in the dark, I chose to do a white font with a black stroke on the outside, and that worked out a lot better than just a straight normal black type. And here's another example of a magic sheet that I did. Just a fun bare bones style that we have going on here. Got a question from Ricardo. Are you actually able to know how it's going to look, or how do you decide which lights you'll use for each thing? So if you're referring to how it's actually going to look, generally I don't know. I'm more of just the programmer and the drafter. So at the very beginning of Next, I was handed a big plot, basically a napkin drawing where the gaffer kind of hand drew in all the fixtures. And then I took that plot and put it into my CAD software, and then put in a little bit more professional looking, like actual symbol fixtures. And then it's digital, so we can modify it a lot easier. And how do we decide which lights we'll use for each thing? If you're referring to the type of lights, that's completely up to the lighting designer or gaffer. They will choose what kind of fixtures they want to use. Go ahead.
And in film, a conversation with the director of photography,
Yeah.
obviously, because they're in charge. You know, for those of us who are new to it, those are they're in charge of the entire look of the production, along with the gaffer is sort of the on-set lighting designer for sure. And so that conversation between the gaffers and the director of photography will actually choose the lighting fixtures that are going to be lighting those sets. And yeah, all that stuff Dominic was saying is definitely true. We sort of take the shorthand and then formalize it, right? And we make it readable to everybody, because a lot of times you do get napkin drawings, and that's why, you know, a very important part of our job is to be competent drafts people. I don't know how to say it right, but yeah. So we should have acumen when it comes to drafting. And look, like there's many like you said, there's a lot of industry standards. A lot of people use Vectorworks, a lot of people use AutoCAD. Also, people can use SketchUp. I don't think anyone's using like Microsoft Paintbrush anymore, but there's a lot of programs out there, assistant lighting designer programs, that allow you to come up with these, to draw out these set maps. So it's really, it's a matter of preference between, well, it's a matter of preference for the person doing it, right? So if I'm the primary on a show, and it's my prerogative to make the drawings look how I'm gonna make them look. So hopefully that answers that question.
And if not, ask away. We love answering questions.
Yeah, it's you can see like we're pretty personable people, so we do like like a back and forth. So as we go, but here we go.
Definitely. So I just wanted to throw in a quick plot of how this magic sheet might translate into a magic sheet on an actual console, because it is coming more common now to have a physical magic sheet on your console right in front of you. And you can even plug the images here. So I took that last image, plugged it into my NA2 software, and put dimmers where actually the lights were on set. So just a fun, quick thing I wanted to share.
Yeah, and as we get into it too, and speaking about the lighting consoles, like understand that as with technology, like just like your iPhone or whatever intelligent phone you have, you know, it's a touch screen. Like all the technology has touch screens now. So like with this particular magic sheet on his console, Dominic can actually press where you on the drawing to get that fixture and call that into the programmer and be able to manipulate that channel. So that's the kind of we're right alongside there with the technology that everybody has, you know, as it continues to move forward in that in essence.
Definitely. So let's take a look at another next plot. It's a little bit busier of a plot here. It was an office space style, and groups were very important to this. And we see our groups kind of in the upper left hand. So the gaffer would request that certain rooms dim down or dim up. So at the beginning, I was using groups quite a lot, but each fixture was still individually channeled. They weren't like one channel number wouldn't control an entire line. And I won't give away what happens, but at one point, controlling those individual fixtures became very important. So again, clean plot that you can hand off. I was fortunate that he didn't want a napkin plot on this one, or pardon me, a pocket plot, because there was a lot of fixtures. But if he did request it, I would have to figure out how to do that. Let's take a little bit of a look at one of your shows, Jared.
Yeah, so like I was saying at the beginning, I did work as the primary board op and lighting programmer on the Fox show Empire. And we're going to look at some of my drawings that I used to control this show. And then these, also to note that these are also drawings that anyone who was a substitute or a backup for me would use when they came to work on set. So these are drawings that actually, it's interesting to note that they evolved over, you know, 6 seasons. They merged and came different, and like the font got bigger as my eyes got worse and that sort of thing. But yeah, so let's look at some set maps from Empire. Okay, and what I want to do with all these different maps I'm about to show you, I'm going to talk about, because we did want to stress, like, we wanted to, as we said, we want you to start thinking like a programmer, thinking like a dimmer op. So like here, I'm letting you know the concept behind how I created the drawings, because it's not just black and white. There's some like method to the madness behind it. So what we're looking at now is an example of a master map, which is encompassing 2 full stages of sets that were all tied together with a common theme. That being the theme of this office place in which the show, the show's company resided. So we're talking about sets within sets, right? So for me, when you're looking at this drawing, and even on your little Zoom screen here, or however big screen you have, it's difficult to sort of take in all these numbers. We do see like color representation and fixture representation, and we see those important things like the title block and the cardinal directions. But it's really difficult for me to look at this with any accuracy or speed. So we really need to break it down further. So the next slide here, if we click back, I just want to show you, this is actually the green room, what was called the green room set, and it's in this space right here. So when I zoom in, I have another full drawing that is just of this green room set. So all these mini maps contain the same information as the larger map, and in a perfect world, they all have their key and their the fixture type and everything like that we need to understand the drawings all the way back from when we were talking about our theatrical lighting plot. Well, and then, you know, like we're both not afraid to point out our own mistakes, right? So what's missing from this drawing that we've been stressing all along, right? It's the key. The key is the key, and there is no key here. So what have I done? But anyway, anyway, you get to use a shorthand, which a lot of people, when you work with them for a long time, understand the shorthand. So, but you really do want to make your drawings, you know, for lack of a better word, dummy proof, so that every member of the crew or anyone stepping in can understand them. So here, just like on our other set maps, we can see things. Here again are our, our ladder lights represented. We can see some par 64s on a bar here, understanding that like channel 676, that's how we're calling up that one particular par on the board. And when we're talking about like our ladder lights here, channel 221 through 229, you can see those are controlled by group 175. So I would control all 9 of those fixtures with group 175. And here again, a variety of different practicals, which was the same from another drawing, this orange triangle representing a chandelier or a pendant type of light, and that's controlled via channel 563. So that's sort of a map within a map. Another same thing on this bigger drawing, there was a swing section of this set that would be used for different things, whether they were a hospital room or a psychiatrist's office and different things. Notice on here we have the fixture key. Again, it's very simple. And notice that even for our screens here, our font's pretty big. I can read it I can sit back and I can still read the channel numbers. So that's really stressing that important part that your drafting wants to have that readability and that you want to be supplied with something readable. And when you are functioning as a substitute or coming in to work that set, this is what we're stressing, get this information in advance, go over it, understand it, ask any questions to the primary board op that you have about it. And I think typically, you're going to be set up for success. They're not going to want you to be missing any information when you step into that role. Okay, and then even add a layer. So what's interesting about Empire was the fact that we actually use, as you can see here, there's some performance lighting happening, a variety of things going on, dressed on top of this pre-existing lobby set that was on the main map. So here I've actually created another plot sort of on top of a plot with all the intelligent fixtures and tube LED tube lighting that we placed into this particular performance. So, that's another thing that could be happening where you're tasked with doing a music performance on one particular set of yours, or they're having you're on a set and they're having a birthday party and they put some like DJ lights up. So, that's kind of the idea there on this particular map. So here's what I want to talk about conceptually. It's called the AB concept, which this one's pretty easy to grasp, but I have a A map and a B map of the same set. So again, the space is at a premium, right? So I want the drawing to be completely readable. So on this, you can see I have all my ladder lights again, all my channels, very bold, dark, easy to read, different colors, filled into the set where they actually lay on the set as best we can. Sometimes we'll scooch things around to make things more physically readable. You can see here that I have all my groups that I would need represented. So this is the A portion of this hotel suite set. But if I click to the B portion, there is an extensive LED ribbon install on this set. And so I went ahead and created 2 different maps, 2 different drawings with the this one just representing all that LED ribbon and the specific channel numbers of that ribbon and the type of ribbon we were using. As we know, there can be hybrid ribbon with both daylight and warm LEDs, tungsten, excuse me, daylight and tungsten, as well as a color mixing type of LED ribbon, an RGBW, red, green, blue, white color mixing ribbon, which is represented here by the sort of lavender ribbon channels. So this harkens all the way back. This is kind of the same concept as the Broadway theater magic sheet that we talked about. Again, groups, title block, fixture key, all very important things to be on your drawing. Want to talk about the fact that you're beginning, I think you can see, as you've looked at all these drawings, the trends in both Dominic and I's drawings. I think its ability to tell you have a style as a draftsman, as a programmer, and it's true of programming in itself, that you have a different style, but you accomplish the same thing. But you can tell who drafted the drawing. So when I want to talk about this homogeneous plot here, the idea is that what I'm showing here matches all the other maps I've already shown you. It's a syntax and a scheme that makes sense for me in particular and to my crew that I'm working with. I know on any of my drawings that I've shown you, an orange triangle will represent an incandescent practical that is either a pendant or a hanging lamp or a chandelier. I know that a yellow channel number like this one here is representative of a 2.4K dimmer, a 2400 watt dimmer. I know that my blue circle here with a yellow channel number inside is representative of that 220 volt circuit there. So we can see that this is a 20K Fresnel hanging on this truss. And I know that, like going back to the Mind Games plot and map, the fact that the electricians knew they had to rig, you know, a 220 volt circuit to this truss to travel with this 20K. So there's all this information that's synthesized and put onto this, what I, you know, fairly clean drawing, as it were. And it matches every other drawing I do on that particular show. And it's not to say when you change shows that your style's not going to change. Like I said, over the years, your style evolves and you draft things different. But for me, I can continue this color scheme and I know what I'm getting. And we'll go on to something I was tasked with a lot on Empire, which, you know, I felt honored to have any creative input into the show myself. You know, serving as a lighting designer a lot of times for the concert shots we did, I would be tasked at creating these larger drawings for the rigging electric crew to load in these moving light packages. This here is representing a specific performance load in we did. A lot of intelligent lighting. This is something we haven't looked at as much, but a lot of intelligent lighting means a lot more info. This drawing is also it's a hybrid of all the drawings we've already seen. So it's a mix of ground plan, it's a mix of elevation, it's a mix of plot, a lighting plot, it's a mix of a set map, and it has patch information on it. So it's all has a lot of specificity. And it's this drawing right here should be all the crew needs from you to load in that particular rig. But just highlighting a couple points on it, when I'm talking about the elevation section. So obviously in the drafting world, we're talking about elevation. We're talking about looking at something straight on it, like the wall is in front of us, or this truss structure is standing about 15 feet tall in the air. So we can see I've denoted to the rigging crew, and this isn't only for the rigging electric crew, it's for the rigging crew themselves as well. We see these crossbars that they need to be hung at 2'6", and this one needed to be at 6'6". And then some of these are spacing towards the center of the instrument. For instance, on these LED strip lights up here, we see that they're on 4'4" centers on the instrument. So that's a lot of information there. We can see the channel numbers here listed in yellow. Again, this is like when I'm controlling this particular fixture here, I'm controlling channel 8013. So we've been talking about 1 through 12 or 1 through 96, but you can see as time goes on and when you're controlling more and more intelligent lighting fixtures and more pixelated fixtures, which is sort of all the rage now is pixelating things. You can be tasked with just having to understand and know thousands of numbers. And that way, the concept of that grouping is still important, so important that you can control all these fixtures with all these different attributes. Because certainly when we look at these fixtures like the Clay Packy BI K20 down here, that can actually take up, God, I forget without looking up what it was, but it's about 220, 230 addresses on a universe. So running them in a full pixeled out mode, I can only put 2 of these lights on a single universe. So going back to talking about my local area network, it has to be robust enough to be able to control multiple universes of lighting. and that way we're going to talk in our second section of the class, we're going to talk about system expansion. But if you remember back to that drawing, there was some data processors further expanding our universe capability. And you can see just a shorthand for me here is that we know that this entire truss elevation, I'm using DP4, data processor number 4. And if we're able to zoom in a little closer, you would see the address is 1/184 on channel 405, which means it's universe 1 on data processor 4, and its starting address is channel 184, or address 184, but I'm calling it up as channel 405 on the lighting console. So that concept Dominic and I have talked about, just knowing that you have so many numbers to synthesize and quickly and easily to do it. The last thing I want to mention on this particular slide before we move on is there's a thing here, the PEA, and you can see it says 219, PEA:219. I'm sorry, I think next time we'll zoom in a little closer, but this is what we got right now. But the other important thing to know, and I think as set electricians and other people, you know, we want to be abreast of the newest technology, right? Like, you want to know what lights you're controlling. This is also another point to stress, like, know the shooting package you're walking into, and understand that these days, so many fixtures are put on the dimmer op lighting programmer. You know, they're set by the electricians, but then we have ultimate control of their color and intensity and all the other attributes we can do. So understand that, you know, you need to know what lighting fixtures you're working with. So this BI that we've been talking about has actually, when you're running it in its full out pixel mode, it needs to have a separate address to control just the pixelated channels on there. So I knew that this fixture, and I represented to the rigging electric crew that it was a multiple address fixture, and that Pixel Engine address actually started 35 addresses after its start address. And that's when you would be knowing that each red, green, blue, white pixel starts at that particular address. So that's a lot to take in, I think. This is certainly a more complex rig, but whether you're a stagehand in a local, or whether you're a shooting electrician, or whether you're the gaffer or DP, you can start to understand like all the things that are like zooming around in our mind, you know, when we're creating these things. And even the fact that on this particular show, just like the sound department, we would actually use time code triggers to play back lighting cues specifically each time. So I wouldn't actually be pressing the go button. It would be triggered off a time code. So even when the sound was ducked out and we were doing close-ups of a dialogue scene, you know, the concert lighting would play back specifically as it was supposed to, without me having to listen and play the cues back. So that's a lot of stuff to take in. And Dominic, I hope I know it's my slide to talk about, but I hope it will help me more on this one. I want to take the last, like, we're actually doing better than we have in our local classes on time. So I wanted to take the last, probably there's like 5 minutes here maybe left of discussion of these slides, and then we can field all the questions in the world and have all the dialogue we want to between everybody. But what we wanted to pop up now was just a final example of a stage map that's pretty comprehensive, that takes into all the concepts that Dominic had talked about on his drawings, and all the concepts I talked about on my drawings. So we're going to take a little time to review this specific map and see what info, and are we getting new info, and what is the old info. So just for me starting off, like, you can kind of see, like we talked about that style, you can probably tell that this is one of my Empire maps. It has the same color combinations for the channels. There's my orange triangle again. I know it's a hanging lamp. So that homogeneous thing is happening. You can see that I've got all my groups here represented in yellow down at the bottom. I've got how my sky panel space lights are represented, and we're gonna pop in closer on this one. And here again, you know, if you just want to kind of, maybe Dominic, you want to talk through the key a little bit more?
I'd like to point out something new, maybe, something I
Yeah.
haven't seen yet, is you listed some macros here, which is really nice. And that's something, you know, if the main lighting programmer is creating macros, and if I were to hop in and be the fill-in for the day, I'd definitely want like a full description of that macro. So I would ask Jared, you know, okay, is macro 901 provide hard power for all of your intelligent fixtures out there? Anything unique I need to know about that kind of items?
And just,
Um,
Dom, can you give the definition of what a macro means to us?
Definitely. So a macro performs multiple keystrokes or commands at once, and it can control quite a lot of pretty much everything on a console. So basically, it's a shortcut. So a common command on a set might be for the fixture, the gaffer will ask you to turn a fixture off. So you'll hit fixture 100 at 0, enter. And that can be a lot of buttons to hit. It's not a lot, but maybe I want to save some time. So I'll program a macro to take my selected fixture down to 0. And then I could just type macro 1, enter. And if macro 1 were to be programmed to take the fixture out, then it would go to 0. So it's about saving keystrokes. It's a big part of uh, entry level macros.
Yeah. And on that note too, with all the lighting consoles that we'll discuss in the second session, you can actually, just like your laptop, I mean, there's shortcuts to do everything. There's shift keys, there's all sorts of different things. So it's important. I mean, just stress the fact that you should like read your manual, you know, or manuals are online these days too, you know. So really understand what the console can do and how it can, like Dominic's talking about macros, how it can work for you or make your patching or programming easier.
Yeah, that would definitely be an item I ask. Okay, so what multiple keystrokes is macro 901 actually performing? And Jared would tell me, well, that turns all these channels to full, or perhaps parks all these channels at full. And that might be something I want to ask him, like, hey, is it parking these channels or is it placing them at full? Because maybe they get recorded into a queue, and I would guess macro 901 parks them at full? Question mark.
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, so this takes into account that we had some DMX data controlled relays that are on and off. You know, relays on and off for power. So I could control that from the lighting console. That way, our intelligent fixtures weren't on, you know, 24/7, and we cut back on the electricity bill as far as that goes. So yeah, we could use that macro in which to turn those relays on and off. And so I didn't have to type out, you know, a 20 or 30 step command to make that happen. I just had to build a macro once, and that's how that happened.
Yeah. I also see the current notes where he talks a little bit about channels. So that's something I'd like, and I'd read them. I would understand them pretty much right away, but then I might ask, okay, are there any other current notes that need to get added in here? Possibly. And then I'm also looking over here at the ladders. So I don't really know what these percentage ranges mean. Maybe it's, I'm looking at the bottom there and seeing 0 to 0% being 0, and then I see a 3 to 5%. Might that mean that the fixture won't even turn on until you hit 3%? What's going on there?
Right. And so this is the important conversation to have. Like if Dominic was my sub, I would need to explain these things to him. And so for me, on this drawing, you know, maybe I should have been a little more clear and maybe use the equal sign instead of the dash sign. So in this case, these LED ladder lights, which we've mentioned a lot in this particular brand or whatever they were, it eludes me at the time, but we needed to create, you know, other specific different things we do on the lighting console. We create custom curves for lighting instruments if they don't dim up in a linear fashion and we have to smooth out a curve. Or for this particular LED fixture, if you put it anywhere from 61% to full, there was no actually shift in the intensity of the lighting fixture. So this this is sort of on top of a custom curve was created, I knew that my lighting fixture at full was only going to be need to set at 60%. And I knew if the gaffer asked me to put the lighting fixture at 25%, I would actually put it at 15%. So they didn't need to know that, but as a programmer, I needed to know that. They only want to know it's at half its output possible. So I know if I need to be at half its output possible, I would put the channel of that ladder light at 30%. So that would be a perfect thing to discuss with your incoming programmer who's subbing for you.
Cool.
And yeah, just pop in, you know, a tiny bit closer on this last one, and then we're almost to our Q&A portion here. It's still a lot of information, right? In general, all this paperwork, it's just about synthesizing and simplifying information. But here again, for me, I like to stress that homogeneous plot. Like I understand anywhere on any drawing what I'm looking at without having to look at the key. So as you work on something and you become familiar with it, it just kind of sticks with you. And like Dominic knows too from working in theater, like when we're theatrical lighting designers, that giant grease plot, like this is kind of how our brain works. I memorized the entire plot. I didn't have to look at anything. I didn't even need to look at the magic sheet. Like that's kind of how our brain works, and how, you know, when you're getting into programming, you need to kind of open yourself up to that wealth of information that is needing to be synthesized, and you need to be able to communicate it really clearly to everyone you're working with. So, you know, last but not least, there's just some markings on here that are helpful. You know, this particular fixture, we don't know without looking at the key what exactly it is, but we can see that it's right next to this triple F sockapex. And so in my stage lettering and numbering, I know that, you know, triple F multi-cable sockapex starts at a dimmer, you know, 431. That's a lot of dimmers, right, for one stage. And I mean, we're talking about, you know, motion pictures, television shows, it all the scale. We're talking about using the same concepts on a variety of scales too, right? You know, like all shows are scaled differently. The cooking show was very small. Empire, pretty big. You know, Dominic's show, pretty big. So it's really that scalability that we're concerned about here. But you know, I think we kind of beat that down, and I think we've gotten that point across. And you know, really, this is what we wanted to talk about. This first session was the concept and the understanding the paperwork that we use to get to the point where we can actually get on a board and do some programming, I think. So Dominic, do you have anything to add before we go to our Q&A here?
Yeah, I think this is pretty great here. I mean, getting to see a variety of all these plots, I think we saw 5 different types of drafting style today, and that's a lot. And it's pretty cool that we got to see a lot of Jared's plots. I just think they're fantastic, and I've learned a lot by looking at them. But you know, developing your own style and getting to recognize other people's styles will really help you excel.
Yeah,
with that, I think we can ask if there's any questions at all, stuff people would like to discuss, and then we can give away a couple testers. If Brad Dickinson is still with us, did you want to talk a little bit about Wysiwyg or anything like that?
One second.
Sure.
So Don, is there?
So your
There we go.
you got me? Okay.
Yeah, Brad.
Okay. Very very quickly. Yes, I've used Wysiwyg for a number of years. It allows.
Awesome.
The other thing it does with regards to the plot, I can do my patch in the plot and then transfer that right to the board. So basically, as I turn around and do it, I've got the plot, I've got all the information in, I've got all my instrument reports, I've got everything like that. I can tell my weight on my truss, I can tell everything like that. So all those reports come, but the integration with the console is the biggest thing. So I don't have to do a dual patch. So as I've patched in my plot, it basically takes that and then dumps it over to the Grand MA.
That's really Cool.
ETC and all that sort of stuff.
So you're doing a lot of your development in Wysiwyg, and then it converts it into a file recognizable by MA?
Yeah.
That's
And,
awesome.
and the other thing too is when somebody asked, can I pre-visualize? Do I have an idea what I'm going to get? Yes, and as a matter of fact, I can show the camera angle with the lens, etc. So I can put that. I can also turn around and have real-time video running. I've also done media servers and all that stuff, so I can have video running in a video wall and things like that. So if I want to have smoke, atmosphere, I've got that. I can see how the beams are. I can see the intermixing of the gobos. I can see colors intermixing and all that stuff all in real time. I mean, before all this stuff, I used to do Maya, and 3D Studio Max and things like this. But that's one of the benefits. That's why I asked if you guys did this sort of thing, because doing all of the plot work is worthwhile. But then having to go and repatch and do whatever and put it all into a console just becomes time consuming. And also not only that, I can, once I've done my plot, I can pull out all my if I want an instrument sheet to send off to the rental company, I've got that. So, and the key is automatically made as I start adding stuff into the plot itself. So, I've also used Vectorworks, and that's all good because they also have a visualizer in it also. But just
yeah, absolutely. And I think as time goes and technology goes, it's sort of like we're talking about in the toolbox, right? There's a lot of different visualizers that do accomplish this task. For me, certainly, like not specifically coming from the rock and roll background, but doing more performance-based lighting on the television show, I certainly did use a visualizer to pre-light some concert scenes we're doing, and that is an invaluable tool at times. For the wham bam sort of nature of the day-to-day on an episodic TV show, and if you're only the one person working, it gets to be tough to do all those things. And certainly in the concert industry, and time is money out there in the world, and you get to sit in those previs suites and create the looks of your show beforehand. And certainly like Broadway shows do this, and like Brad, like you mentioned, all this is great stuff. It's great stuff when you have the time to do it, but I think it's very important to learn the integration. I mean, even ETC just came out with that Hamilton project that you can control Hal Binkley, RIP, his lighting plot from your offline ETC console, and you get to see the cues and how they previs that show, and it really is quite an amazing tool. And it does speak to the fact that there's so many consoles and so many visualizers and there's so many products out there. So you do fall into, what you feel comfortable with. And like Brad said, he uses an MA. Dominic likes MA. It's just different tools. Like people use high-end systems, HOGs, and people use ETC, EOSs. So it's really like a preference sort of thing. And certainly we'll get to explore that digital realm more of the actual consoles in our second session tomorrow. So I hope some of you are coming back for that.
I would note about some of the software, some of the shortfalls I find, what I'd like it to be able to do is be able to automatically, for example, put DMX lines in. So just click, and I said, okay, DMX line from this one, click, and it automatically does it. If I'm turning around and putting in power lines, if I'm doing anything like that, I'd like more automation happening with it. I don't know about your end, but I found a lot of them sort of lacking that way. Like it's to say, I've got to draw in a line and say it's DMX, as opposed to just, okay, here's port 2. It's going to this light like this, and all of a sudden I've got an auto line drawn there.
Yeah, it'd be pretty cool if there's something out there similar to like a node-based program like Touch Designer, only like for very specifically for lighting. I bet you could do it in Touch Designer, but that's so above me, unfortunately. But yeah, that would be really cool if Vectorworks could implement an option like that, or these other programs. I'm definitely going to check out Wysiwyg with your recommendation a little bit more. Unfortunately, I have not gotten into it yet.
Yeah, I would say like semi off subject, but not to finish things out, but to say we are going to tackle a little bit about, because another thing we're dealing with is film and TV set programmers now, and in all aspects, just like everything else, is this idea of wireless, right? There's great Filmscape classes already devoted to wireless from camera and wireless from sound. So that's something we'll be examining a little in the next portion of the class, because that is everyone is relying so heavily on wireless data systems these days to do their bidding, that it's really something we have to deal with a lot as board ops and dimmer ops on television shows. And I know others who are on here could probably speak to that too. But Brad, yeah, absolutely. All your points are certainly valid, and always wanting more and automation in the drafting program and the back and forth. And it's great how Lightright can speak right to Vectorworks, and there's that cloud-based idea that they're transferring info back and forth, and everything's keeping current. So that really is the way of the future, I think.
One quick question would be utilizing online information. So for example, creating a project, how well does your software allow online collaboration? So for example, you're dealing with the gaffer, you've made changes, you've done whatever. They may want to sit back and say, hey, I don't know the change you made, I don't know. So I'm not necessarily on set, but before getting on set, being able to go in the cloud and say, hey, let me see all the different set you've got going. And they're doing the paper napkin sketch. If all of a sudden they can drop in and say, oh, I want this here. How do you find that with the software? How do you find the online collaboration abilities of it?
Rough. Yeah, I mean, I utilize a lot of Google Drive, and generally I just physically drag drawings in. It'd be really cool if there's like a collaborative online SketchUp, perhaps, idea. What do you think, Jared?
Well, I mean, you can certainly share, like there's the cloud-based like Vectorworks viewer and that sort of thing. But I would say, I think it's just, to mostly your question, I think it just depends on the production you're working on, right? Like look, I'm not going to say, like, I've been on the same show for 6 years, right? I've had a few different gaffers, but I have kind of held that Bible of information, and I kind of issued it, at will. And in the instance we were working on there, it was kind of like, I in my position I was in was the holder in the information. It was important for me to always update it. Again, we talk completely about the multitasking aspect of this job, right? Like we're always drafting something else or working on another show file while we're controlling the show file and the shooting crew package on that day. So we're always multitasking to do this. So, Brad, I can't specifically speak to that functionality between a particular gaffer and myself or anything. I know that it's there and a usable thing. I haven't had too much experience myself using it. I feel like I've been the keeper of the keys a lot and just had to keep that information the way it needed to be and present all that complex stuff just really concise and sort of dummy proof on my drawings or my magic sheets or whatever. Same for when I was a theater assistant or programmer or, even lighting designer, because how a lot of times in theater, you're a one-person army, at least coming up in like the storefront scene in Chicago here. You're kind of one-person lighting department, so you got to manage all that stuff on your own. But certainly, you have great points, Brad.
Okay, well, I don't want to take up all the Q&A here because it's been a great presentation. I think people got a lot out of it, so I will jump off at this point. Thank you.
It was nice to talk to you, Brad. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to drop my email here. If you happen to have any Wysiwyg tutorials, I would love to know them because it's something I need to know. I've been mostly using Light Converse and then MA 3D, and I hear good things. And Vectorworks is one that I'm gonna start getting into Unreal Engine hopefully soon in Wysiwyg, and that would be great. Shall we give away some testers?
Oh, sure. That was our that was our only question. Well, we must have done a decent job then.
Yeah. If anyone has any other questions, shout out now. Michael Fleming was asking you to just plug it. I'm not sure what that means, but
Just plug it.
just plug it.
Klug it. Klug it.
Plug it.
That's a lighting designer we both know and respect a lot. Here in
Cool.
Very well. Yeah, let's give something away. I don't exactly know. We will find out how you get this specifically, but we are now going to give it away. So here we go.
Definitely. So get ready to answer these questions in the chat window. And if you already have these items, you know, let some of the rigging and shooting electricians get these items, or, you know, get another item for yourself. But we're going to ask some questions, and the first person to give a valid answer will get the product.
All right.
So ready for question one here?
Here we go.
What
So
item controls multiple channels at one time?
talked about this a lot.
Hey, we got Bradley Smith answering first there. Very nice.
All right, Brad, way to go.
Cool. So these next two questions, what do you say the first two people to give unique, valid answers for this next question?
Yeah, that seems good. Yeah, for sure.
Bradley, drop your email in the chat and I'll make sure to write it down. And let's go to the next.
All right, so you're the fill-in dimmer op, what we've been talking about. What are some essential items that you need to request from the full-time dimmer op or lighting programmer? Anyone answer them?
Not yet.
No? I'll answer to win. I want to. So what we're talking about here is what we talked about. Like if you're walking in dark, you know, what do you need to know?
Cool. We got plots from Brad Dickinson and channel hookup instrument schedule from Michael Fleming. Awesome. I think that'll work for 2 more products.
Great.
Very cool. Brad and Michael, if you want to drop your emails in there. And then for this last one, let's just the first person to give a valid answer. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds good. So name a core responsibility for the full-time lighting programmer / dimmer op. We talked about all these back at the beginning of the day. The 2 hours.
Bradley Smith, you already won one, but that is a valid one. Dimmer room check.
Don't hog it all, Brad. Anybody else?
Great drawings. What kind of drawings, Daniel? There we go. I like it. CAD lighting stage plots. That'll work. Daniel, drop your email in there.
All right. That's awesome.
Very cool. We got bradlighting@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, with that, if there are no more questions, you know, Dominic and I want to thank you for your time in attending this session. It's brought to you by the local motion picture studio mechanics, IATSE 476 here, of which I'm a 6-year member. Dom, hopefully we'll get him in real soon. He's been working with us really great over the past year. But, you know, thank you so much. And we really hope to see you at the second part of the session tomorrow, where we get into talking about the digital representation of all these concepts on the console, as well as specific things about patching and some stuff about wireless DMX and some fun things like that. So thanks again, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone, very much. I'd like to emphasize that I'm very available to talk, hang out, you know, online, talk lighting all the time. This is what I do. This is what I love. I'm about to go to the Lighting in a Virtual World seminar that starts up in 10 minutes, and hopefully we see you guys again tomorrow.
Yeah, and thanks for Filmscape for having us, and be
Definitely.
sure to get out to these other classes with these other great teachers. Thanks a lot.
Peace out.
Yeah. All right, Dom, will you pop? Oh, he's gone.